Advocate, thanks for joining us this afternoon. I mean, given the fact that we've got, the policies that promote multilingualism in the country, how do you think we're faring so far in truly being the people that embrace their diversity and cultural diversity and languages for that matter?
I think 25 years into a democracy, some strides have been made, to make our own a truly multilingual and multiracial society. But when it comes to our languages, I think there's an improvement that we need to ensure as South Africans. The National Research Council came up with a transformation charter where we lay out norms and standards as to what is it that needs to be done in order to transform our heritage. Now, when it comes to languages, the transformation charter is clear, where we say that we need to move away from preserving languages, but also to develop languages. For instance, in English and Afrikaans, to be where it is today, it was developed. That is why we're coming up, for instance, with as part of the transformation charter, of course, the South African dictionary. Because our languages, especially our indigenous languages, are not used and also not developing. So you need resources to ensure that. You need political will to do that. So that they move away. There must be a paradigm. And also, at the level of in education, it's an unfair competition between a black child and a white child who actually speaks, whose mother tongue is Afrikaans at school. Therefore, it may be a dream actually to have a black child, performing at the same level, like an Afrikaner child who actually, studies his or her own mother tongue as a medium of instruction.
Advocate, then does that not mean that us, people that are, on the top echelons of society, people that are in government, actually suffer from a problem of a colonized mind? And let me explain why. Because we have this conversation over and over again. And maybe the conversation we should having is that maybe we need to start looking at decolonizing the way in which we view languages. For example, instead of having children pass English and Afrikaans in order for them to move on to the next grade, that maybe we should be looking rather at them actually passing two languages, irrespective of what that language is, in order to meet that demand of developing languages. That maybe the issue is around policymakers, the people that are actually there drafting these policies, the people that are there to implement the policies, that maybe we suffer from a colonized mind where we still view English and Afrikaans as, or English and one more other language as an important language to pass, instead of just saying, if you pass isiZulu nesiXhosa, then automatically you can move on to the next grade. That actually English does not necessarily have to be the one that you pass as a language.
As the National Research Council, we have moved away from romanticizing this matter, to actually practice. That is why, for instance, we've been engaging the Department of Education. We have now, moved even to provinces, to pilot this work in some of the provinces, where we're saying that, we look at the learner support material, the life orientation subject in schools, to ensure that heritage is infused, in our own education curriculum. Because if we talk, and talk, it's not, next day we're going to come back on the same challenge. So the issue of decolonization, I think, we're past that. We're saying that this must be done, in order for us to, because the policies are there. It has got to be done. That's why we're looking at... Is
government listening to you? I mean, I'm hearing the fact that you're saying that we need to start moving away from just having a talk shop. And I don't want you and me to have the same conversation next year about the very same matter. So how much pressure is being put on government to actually start implementing from the ground level and actually making sure that this comes to fruition? Because it does not make sense in 2019 that we're still looking at a child passing English and maybe an isiZulu or English and one other language, and then they can move on. Why don't they have a way that they can pass Setswana and Lesotho?
That is why I'm raising this issue that as the Research Council, we have actually, we're talking to the Department of Education, and not just talking, as we have, for instance, there's a task team, and that task team of the Minister set up by the Minister of Education, that ensures that in grade 11 and 12, indigenous languages or history, is going to be compulsory. But the National Research Council was saying that let's look at the toolkit, in the education, department. Talk to teachers, train them, to ensure that the issue of heritage is actually infused. That's why we're in the Eastern Cape only a month back, when they've agreed to have set a time frame. Because after talking to the Department of Education nationally, we're now talking to provinces to pilot what we're talking about in the transformation charter to realize, and then change the paradigm, ensuring that the black child, experiences, education that is actually through her own mother tongue. This actually must be done. We can no longer romanticize it. It must be done. Yeah. That is why we're saying that we're going to measure that. We're going to Limpopo as well after Eastern Cape to ensure that the program is growing and people are coming up. We're going to be talking to educators themselves, training them. Because we're tired as Research Council, for instance, where we're asked by a teacher in Gugulethu that I'm teaching heritage tomorrow, how many heritage sites does South Africa have, and so forth. You can't go to China having that. Chinese students are taught their own mother tongue. They also taught their own history. That is why I was saying that in as much as we are not in charge of education, what is happening in the classroom but we are talking to the Department of Education, the Research Council, to say that we can no longer romanticize the issue of decolonization of our education system to ensure that the black child, is actually taught through his own or her own mother tongue.
Yeah, Advocate, I hear you, and you're saying that you are talking to the Department of Basic Education. My question then is, are they listening?
Fortunately, they are listening. That's hence we have, after talking to the DG of Education, we actually send us to the provinces, and we have had a very successful meeting with the province of the Eastern Cape, where we spoke to the entire echelon of the department. And now, only next week, we are not going to meet. We understand, we've agreed on the framework as to what must be done. We're going to now target 20 schools to actually introduce, the template and start now, implementing the program. And I think we've set ourselves time frame to say that in the next 2 years, we must ensure that at least about 2 provinces we have actually introduced the program, and it's receiving, I would say, nationwide, attraction. Even in provinces where they've seen it in the social media, they're saying that the Research Council, come to us. We want to experiment this issue of change. In fact, we're now going to produce learner support material, to say about our own heritage, and to change the content. We've even now studied the value chain of education. Where do they get books, for instance, and so forth? And where in these books, where the South African authors, as we assume that this is the year of literally classics, and so forth, so that we see that, and we introduce this matter. We can no longer, delegate it. That's why we're saying that we need to do this, and with the Heritage Board is working, the Department of Education, I take this. We've already met with the South African, also SGBs, SGB Association.
Well, Advocate, I know that's definitely not going to be the last time you and I have a conversation about this. You see exactly what the progress report looks like. But as you said rightfully in the beginning, that we can no longer romanticize this issue. Maybe it's about us decolonizing our mindset in the way in which we approach languages in this country. But we're going to leave it there for this afternoon, speaking to Advocate Sonwabile Mangolcha here about really the issue of languages and what is it when it comes to celebrating Heritage Day. Exactly what are we celebrating here, and how do we actually implement practical tools to educate and equip the next generation?